Welcome back to Free to Write. Bust the blocks that keep you stuck. Today, in Lesson 7, our final lesson, I'm going to talk about relapse, or what happens when you find yourself stuck again, either midstream in a project or upon completing a body of work. Quite honestly, there's only one way to avoid recurrent blocking, and that is to write away the writing terrors. What I mean by writing terrors are the feelings of dread and fear that descend on you, leaving you unable to continue what you've started or to start something new. One minute you're writing and you're in the flow. You can imagine all kinds of positive outcomes for your work. You're proud and pleased with what you've accomplished. But then in a flash, you find yourself mute. If you're in the middle of a story, you can't imagine what to write next. If you finished and typed those final words, "the end," you are at a loss as to what to do next. Of course, there is the process of editing and revising, which is inevitable or should be. And once you feel your manuscript is as finished as it's going to get, you start to research agents, publishers, and publications. But this is all just the busy work of writing, the selling of your product, which in most cases will be rejected many times before a yes comes. Not to sound like a doomsdayer, but that has been my experience. Leaving the market aside, what about your creative flow? Do you intend to be a one-shot wonder, or are you committed to the writing life? A wise teacher once told me, always keep something out there. By that, he meant that I should always have 2 or 3 stories, poems, or chapters looking for a home, so that when the inevitable rejection came, I would still feel hope. Hope is very important to this writer. It's often the only thing that keeps me going. So if you're going to keep several balls in the air, you've got to have something to juggle with. This means that you have got to keep producing work. But how can you if writing blocks keep tumbling down, impeding your way? How can you keep writing? Let me tell you a secret. The blocks never have to come back. It's all a matter of perspective. You're going to argue that it isn't a matter of perspective when you sit down at your desk and nothing comes. I'll argue right back at you that you're looking at the writing process the wrong way. Blocks are only blocks when we tell ourselves that they are. But given a different perspective, blocks can be instrumental in allowing us the breaks necessary to let our ideas ferment. If you don't recoil from blocks, but rather ask them what they are trying to teach you, you may find that your writing, when it starts up again, will be richer and more meaningful than before. Writers are not machinists. Though we may use laptops and tablets, we are not computers ourselves. Writers are channels for the inspired ideas and words that come from the universe. From Green Eggs and Ham to The Great Gatsby, writers convey truths and lessons about human experience. In my experience, if I show up every day and write my 3 morning pages, I open the channel to my greater power. I find that ideas and inspiration have the opportunity to flow. To prevent relapse in writing, only several things are necessary. 1. An honest faith that the universe wants to use me as its voice. 2. A daily commitment to showing up at the page so that magic can happen. 3. A patient recognition that every time I sit down to write, I may not be inspired, but I will not freak out. Writing at its best is a natural process that originates from a power both outside and inside ourselves. If you have worked diligently through the preceding 6 lessons, you have accepted certain truths about your writing personality. You have had the opportunity to let go of these flaws. If you return to these same blocks with the same old perspective and continue to make the same excuses, you have not fully embraced the concept that writing is, at its best, a natural process that originates from a power both outside and within ourselves. Let me repeat these fundamental truths. You may want to jot these down on paper. 1. You have to let go of denial and admit that you are blocked. 2. You have to develop a faith in a universe that wants to use you as its voice. 3. You have to make a daily commitment to showing up to the page, whether journaling or composing. 4. You have to get out of the way and let your muse work through you. Be patient and stop trying to control the process. 5. You have to not freak out or give up if you are not inspired. Just keep picking up the pen every day and see what happens. Step 5 is probably the hardest. How can you not freak out when all your ideas suddenly vanish? You stand at a crossroads in a story and don't know which way is north. The problem here is that you are assuming that north is the direction you need to take. The solution is to let go and ask for help. When I am stuck like this, I ask for direction from the universe, from my muse. She got me into this mess. Now she better get me out. Recently, I met with a young writer who was having some trouble completing his story. He shared with me what he had written. It was good, very good. So good that I didn't want to say too much about it. He was disappointed. I thought you would say more, he told me. What is there to say? I asked. More, he replied. So I told him that in this little bit he showed me, he caught my interest. He had a great story going, and the characters were interesting and credible. But he wanted more. He wanted me to tell him what to write next. He was stuck. I experienced a block like that once, but unlike him, I never told anyone about my block. I lived in the shadow of the opening of a novel that everyone told me was brilliant. But I was stuck, and I stayed stuck, and that novel never got written. I told my young friend what I learned many years later. Be quiet with the characters and listen to them tell you what comes next. Let the story write itself. I think a lot of writers relapse into blocked because they won't surrender to the reality that storytellers are just instruments of a greater power. They worry, what will happen if I let go of my story, if I don't have control? Exactly. They cry, what if I don't like what I write? What if it doesn't come out the way I want it to? That is what erasers and delete keys are for. No creation is perfect the first time. Revision and editing are part of the organic process of writing. So you don't need to be afraid of writing it wrong. Just writing it is right. You can always fix it later. Meanwhile, you can experience the acute pleasure of being surprised by what emerges as you write. Writing is a meditative act. Also, as if by magic, characters do and say things you never imagined. Images flourish in your poems. Your writing comes alive. If you take anything away from this lesson today, I hope it's these few things. To prevent relapse in writing, only several things are necessary. 1. An honest faith that the universe wants to use me as its voice. 2. A daily commitment to showing up at the page so the magic can happen. 3. A patient recognition that every time you sit down to write, you may not be inspired. Don't freak out or give up. 4. Blocks are only blocks when you call them blocks. Look at them in a new way, as breaks, learning moments, time to rest before returning to work. It's only a relapse if you let it be. Until next time.